Today's seminar is going to be a little bit different than the rest. It's on a topic that is very important for all of us, especially graduate students and postdocs, and it has to do with our mental well-being. That being said, I'm very glad to introduce you to Dr. Marsha Carolan. Dr. Carolan was an associate professor in Michigan State University for over 25 years. She was tenure stream faculty in the Department of Human Development and Family Studies. In her academic career, I did many things, but she was mainly focused on training and advising doctoral therapy students. She has served both as an instructor, a supervisor, and administrator as well. So before we jump to the presentation, a quick note as always, please keep your microphones muted. There will be plenty of time for questions after the presentation. But if you have any questions during the presentation, you can type them in the chat and I will translate them to the speaker, or you can, I guess, unmute yourself and ask. So Dr. Carolan, the stage is yours. You can take it away when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your introduction, and thank you all for coming. I also have been working for the last 3 years at FRIB here at MSU as the wellness coach, and I've been a therapist for over 30 years as well. So today I'm going to use some of my experience and talk about the unexamined life, implications for mental well-being. And the main topics I'm going to cover today are contributors to mental health issues, signs and symptoms of mental health issues, and resources and interventions. So Socrates is credited with this statement, an unexamined life is not worth living. And what we want to talk a little bit about today is, what does it mean if your life is not examined? What is the impact of that? So examining one's life really means developing self-awareness, and self-awareness then is usually accessed through self-reflection and being connected to self and others. I'm going to talk about all these again, but this is sort of the basics. The examined life means really identifying and clarifying personal and professional goals. It means developing the ability to be transparent. So asking yourself, what's going on with me? Why am I feeling this? Why am I reacting in this way? It also means being vulnerable, but developing good boundaries around your vulnerability. Boundaries actually help us define who we are in relation to others and teach us how to protect ourselves. Healthy boundaries also allow us to form connections, but respect our own and others' limits and needs. So boundaries are an important part of mental health. So what is self-awareness? It really can be as simple as paying attention to your thoughts and feelings. It can just be that basic, but also being very deliberate about what you say and what you do. It includes the process and ability to reflect on thoughts and feelings and monitor your own reactions. So therapists talk about this concept of reactivity, and it's really that mindless reaction to things for when you don't really know what's going on with you. So things like what makes you mad, what makes you anxious, what makes you feel good, all those sorts of things. And self-awareness can help you recognize those aspects of yourself. It can also help you recognize who you are in the present and what you want to be, both in the present and the future. It helps you to understand and respect your own identity, and also to respect and also expect that others will respect yours. So the Buddhist philosopher Lao Tzu wrote, "The knowledge of self is enlightenment." And so how can knowing oneself lead to a form of enlightenment? That's a really pretty big word, this idea of enlightenment. So knowing oneself, what does that mean? It really means recognizing, again, as we talked about in self-awareness, the parts of yourself that you like and those that you want to change. It can also mean recognizing how you are similar or different from other people. What you believe in and what you stand for are very important aspects of knowing oneself. Recognizing, of course, that change can be hard. It can be very difficult to change who you are, to change and adapt aspects of yourself, often because you are dealing with buried memories and buried experiences, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But if you do those things, you can feel what Lao Tzu talks about as freed or enlightenment, that allows you to feel good about yourself, to feel better. It's also about connections. And this is kind of more my idea, this idea of connection. The idea of connection is really connecting to yourself, which is again, that whole idea of self-awareness, knowing yourself, really understanding yourself, but also being connected to others, as well as being connected to your past and present. I'm going to talk about all of these as well. African-American philosopher Bell Hooks wrote, "When we drop fear, we draw nearer to people." So sometimes fear keeps us from getting closer to people. What does that mean? Well, it really means that fear can act as a barrier. It can put up walls. It can be divisive. And that goes into a deeper kinds of things where fear of people that we don't know, we can draw assumptions about them. It can lead to divisiveness. But I'm also just really talking right now about being connected to others who are around you. It's essential for mental well-being. We're experiencing a lot of that this last year because of the pandemic, that we haven't been able to connect to others in many cases. And there's been increased rates of depression, particularly because people are more isolated. But in general, it's important to have people in your life. It doesn't mean you have to be the center of popularity. It just means that you have to have at least a few people in your life that you can trust. And sometimes you really can't do that until you feel that you can trust yourself. People that you can count on, people that you can laugh with and have fun with, those are even better kinds of things that can help improve your sense of self and your sense of confidence in yourself. But sometimes that process of getting closer to people and opening up yourself to others is scary. What if they don't like me when they get to know me? What if they aren't there when I really need them? So being close to others is where that vulnerability may come in. And being vulnerable means taking risks. It's true also in the process of therapy, that in the process of therapy, in which you're connecting with yourself and with your therapist, you also may need to be vulnerable, which might be scary based on what's happened in your life. And that brings us to connecting, excuse me, with your past and present. Let me just take a sip of water. Okay. To know yourself, you have to also understand the influence of past relationships and events. So you in the present don't exist in isolation. The past has power over us in the present. Each of us has had past experiences that contribute to who we are in the present. And sometimes we don't realize how much these past issues have helped to form who we are today. Family relationships tend to be one of the biggest contributors, both in good ways and in more harmful ways, depending on what happened in your family life. So I'm going to talk about some difficult experiences, and these might be triggers for you. I'm just kind of giving you that warning in case they are. Feel free to take care of yourself. Okay, so there's a whole field that is called adverse childhood experiences, ACEs in psychology. And it's really the study of how childhood events and childhood experiences actually affect who we are as we develop into adults. One of these is actually childhood poverty. And childhood poverty actually has one of the biggest and long-lasting effects on a person's development and on a person's adulthood. And if you think about it, it's because of all the wraparound aspects of childhood poverty. More likely to have poorer schools, more likely to have restricted access to healthcare and nutrition, also different kinds of environmental traumas like unsafe neighborhoods, maybe unsafe or unclean air, all the different aspects that go into childhood poverty. So that's a real dilemma and contributor to adult mental and physical health disparities. But so is, and this cuts across all classes and incomes, childhood sexual, physical, or emotional abuse or childhood neglect. These are actually some of the most well-studied adverse childhood experiences, and often these are things that bring people into the therapeutic process. In addition, you could grow up perhaps in an environment where there was a lot of high conflict in the home. And I just want to say, as a person that was a family therapist and a family studies scholar for a number of years, there's been a lot written on divorce and the effects of divorce. And in fact, divorce is less problematic for children than is living in a high conflict household. And that also depends on the co-parenting that happens after the divorce, of course. Other kinds of experience that could have affected you in the present: growing up with domestic violence, parents who hurt each other or hurt one person in the parental relationship, a parent who hurt a child, siblings who hurt each other. In addition is the absence of a parent who was present and then disappeared perhaps, or is in and out of one's childhood's life. The parental substance abuse, of course, has an effect on childhood experiences as well. Not only in the actual process of that parent being absent, perhaps in the process of being high from alcohol or drugs, but also in the fact that you can grow up learning this as a coping mechanism and perhaps bring that into your own life later on. And then finally, one of the biggest childhood experiences that is hurtful is the loss of a parent or a grandparent or a significant person in your life, someone that you were very close to, and not just the loss, but the fact that perhaps after that loss, no one stepped in to fill that loss for you. So there's a whole study of children and adolescents who grow up in difficult experiences, but still develop into resilient adults. And often it depends on one special person being there in their life. Can be a high school teacher, a coach, a music teacher, someone, or of course a family member. But interestingly enough, it really hinges on having one person that you can count on in your life. Other kinds of experiences that can happen in childhood, but more typically happen in adolescent and young adulthood, is sexual assault. There are some statistics that estimate 1 in 3 women experience sexual assault of some kind in their life, and 1 in 5 men. So women typically experience those more in interpersonal relationships, dating, other kinds of relationships. Men typically experience those in situations like prison, even in the military. The military has a problem with sexual assault. You may have heard that as well. Interpersonal violence also can be happening within teen or adult relationships. If you or someone you know is experiencing interpersonal violence, I can say that this is one of the most difficult things to break away from. A relationship where there is interpersonal violence is very often manipulative and difficult to leave. In addition, it's witnessing violence. So many children or teens grow up in neighborhoods where they may be traumatized by violence, or they grow up in a household where there is violence. And all these can be traumatic experiences that have a lasting impact. Let me take a sip of water. So there's evidence that suggests graduate students and postdocs in the sciences have higher rates of anxiety and depression. And so why is that? What contributes to these higher rates? Well, first, there appears to be a little bit more of the belief or pressure to know it all in the sciences, that you can't ask for help and that then you feel alone. It's more of a competitive environment. That's at least what the research is suggesting. And so therefore, there are many people with that sense of, am I really good enough to be here? Look at so-and-so, they're doing better than me, kind of comparing yourself all the time to other people. And that is called the imposter syndrome. You've probably heard of imposter syndrome. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute as well. In addition, you may have or be working with an advisor, a supervisor, a faculty member that is unapproachable or inaccessible. And so you may be getting some kinds of signals like, I expect you to know all of this. I expect you to look for answers on your own. Don't bother me about these sorts of things. And that, of course, then contributes to this feeling alone. And this, of course, has been more difficult in the pandemic when there's also less access to people that you might have been able to go to before. What else? Well, it appears that there's higher rates of people with ADHD and ADD. So in case you haven't heard those terms, it's most likely in adulthood attention deficit disorder. The hyperactivity is usually associated more with children. But people with this diagnosis are more drawn to the maths and sciences for lots of different reasons. Attention deficit disorder, of course, can increase your anxiety as it's much harder to get your work done. And so it's harder to focus, it's harder to concentrate. And in addition, it might be also that the nature of the work that you're doing in the math or sciences can sometimes be tedious or repetitive. And that also contributes as well. Other difficult experiences. Some young people grow up being bullied, and it's found that particularly in the middle school years has the biggest impact. And maybe that's just because that's kind of a difficult period anyway for children. They're moving between being a child and being an adolescent, that kind of tween years. Bullying might be based on discrimination. It's always based on discrimination, but it might be based on lots of different things: gender, sexual orientation, ability, your identity, just being different than the other kids. It could also be based on racism. And of course, we know that the systemic effects of racism are pervasive, not only in school situations, but also in the universities at times. If you're in the sciences and you're a member of an underrepresented group, and this could again be on any of those dimensions I just mentioned, gender, ethnicity, ability, identity, you may struggle with increased anxiety or depression. This is again a larger aspect of the imposter syndrome. You may feel like you don't belong or feel alone because you don't see yourself represented in a faculty or graduate student population. You may have increased pressures to succeed from family or community based on your identity. You may feel that you're representing others, and you may feel this increased pressure. And all this may contribute to increases in both anxiety or depression. So, how do I know if I'm suffering from anxiety or depression? I'm going to go through now some of the symptoms, some of the things to look out for. One of the red flags, of course, is sleeping. So if you are very anxious, you may be having difficulty sleeping, waking up a lot, not being able to fall asleep at night, waking up too early. All those things are often signs and symptoms of either anxiety and depression, or both, or one of them. Sleeping too much on the other end of the spectrum is often a symptom of depression. Not wanting to get up in the morning. And of course, again, some of this is increased in the pandemic with less options to go places, less options to see people, etc. There's also eating issues, maybe difficulty eating, maybe having no appetite, or maybe eating too much, binge eating some things that feel satisfying in the moment, but maybe affect your health. Also, issues around lethargy, just kind of feeling unmotivated. I've heard this a lot, especially over this last year. The inability to concentrate, the inability to get yourself to do what you're supposed to do. All those sorts of things might be happening and can be linked often to depression. You might also find yourself being more irritable. A lot of people don't realize that irritability is often a symptom of depression. It's not just being cranky and out of sorts. It can be a symptom of your mood. You can also be maybe more short-tempered, easily aroused more to anger, that kind of thing. Another symptom is obsessing and ruminating over the same details and issues, not being able to stop your mind from spinning over and over again about the same worries. Other sorts of symptoms: changing behaviors or feelings, maybe suddenly withdrawing, maybe you or someone you know suddenly doesn't want to be a part of things, withdrawal from normal contacts or activities. And again, in the pandemic, we've been forced in some ways to withdraw from lots of different activities, but you yourself, or if you see a friend, you'll have more of a sense of, is this normal for me? There's also different kinds of feelings that might be increased or heightened, like feelings of shame or feelings of hopelessness or despair, avoiding talking with other people, especially families and friends, maybe crying more easily, maybe crying more than usual. And I do want to say that crying is often vilified, and crying actually can be a wonderful release of emotion. So allow yourself to cry. It's okay to cry, whether you're a woman or a man. It's okay to cry. It's a good release. But if you find yourself crying all the time and that you feel even uncontrollable crying, this may be a symptom of depression. Another thing that has definitely increased, and you may have seen some of this in the news, it's probably not as relevant in your lives, but definitely there's been an increase in opioid use and opioid deaths. But there might also be an increased use of substance in your life. Maybe you're drinking too much, drinking more than usual, not saving up drinking to an occasional drink on the weekend. Maybe you're smoking too much weed. Maybe suddenly, now that we certainly have better access to legalized marijuana, you're finding this is becoming a bigger part of your life. Interesting thing is video games. So video games actually, as an addiction, became a diagnostic criteria a couple of years ago. And that's kind of emblematic, I think, of a new generation of young people. But over involvement in video games can actually become a similar kind of addiction. Now, video games, having fun with them, having a place in your life, absolutely the best thing. But when you actually find that any of your functionality is interrupted, or your productivity or your relationship building because of drinking, smoking, video games, etc., that's when you need to be concerned about it. These are all coping mechanisms. Some are learned. Some are learned in childhood. Some are learned as you're evolving. But all of them are just ways to distract us from our internal pain. So what can I do to help myself? This is the third part of the presentation. So of course you can seek out therapy or counseling resources on your campus or in the community. Right here at Michigan State, I can talk a little bit about that because I'm most familiar with that. We have an excellent student counseling service that includes psychiatric care as well. In fact, at Michigan State, they have more than doubled the number of counselors that they had a few years ago. We also have, and many universities have these services. So if you're part of a university, you most likely have something similar. We also have an employee assistance program. This services both graduate students and staff and faculty. Those are more short-term services, but they also have wonderful links with the community. We also have two campus clinics, the MSU Psychological Clinic and the MSU Couple and Family Therapy Clinic. Both of these are training clinics, so they have very reasonable rates, but you're getting both an advanced doctoral student as well as a supervisor. So it's a very good value. And I was involved for a number of years with the Couple and Family Therapy Clinic as the director. So I can speak to both of these clinics, very high quality. You can also talk to a doctor about getting medication, but also think about getting a checkup. If you haven't had a checkup and you suddenly have different kinds of symptoms, it's possible it could also be linked to something physiological. So consult your doctor, talk to a doctor or a psychiatrist about getting some kind of medication. There are a lot of people in the United States and around the world that benefit from taking psychotropic medications, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, ADHD medications. They can really help you cope and do much better in your life. So get a checkup, consult with a doctor or psychiatrist. In addition, I'm a big proponent of phototherapy, using a therapy light. There's a researcher or two here at MSU actually that has demonstrated that therapy lights can actually help to reduce depression. And so it's an inexpensive way to start helping yourself as well. The other thing that I'd really recommend, and this is all within that kind of therapy format, is to join a support group. If you're reluctant to actually do a campus support group or community support group, maybe you consider doing something like AA or NA, support therapy group. There are just Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous have helped a lot of people. Now that's particularly if you are suffering from some kind of increase in your drinking or drug use. You can also do some very simple things like changing your behaviors. One of the best researched areas of lifting mood is the area of exercise. Exercise physiology has studied the effect on our mood, and it's been demonstrated that exercise really can generate those kinds of feel-good chemicals that help us to feel better. If you don't like the kind of routine exercise, you can just figure out ways to move more. You can pace, you can walk up and down stairs. You can put on music, you can dance, sing loudly, just enjoy movement, and that all can really help elevate your mood. Also, basic things, I know I'll sound like your mother here, but eating more vegetables and fruit, drinking water, getting enough sleep. Again, if you can get enough sleep, if your sleep is being disturbed, that is really one of the most important things that you need to talk to a doctor about. There's also some really wonderful research on being outdoors. They're finding that being outdoors contributes in so many ways to our moods. There's even some data that demonstrates that it contributes to intelligence to be outdoors. So, and then one of the other kinds of things is nurture, adopt a pet, find something that you can help take care of. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, which is volunteering. I love this idea of do good to feel good. There's lots of data that suggests that if you do something for others, it helps, of course, you feel good. And there are lots of different ways to actually volunteer. I know it's harder now with the pandemic, but hopefully we're going to be seeing the end of that in a couple of months. But you can also volunteer even over Zoom, virtual volunteering, mentoring a student, helping with some kind of activity, joining some kind of group, either on campus or with a church or community. Those are all ways also to not only connect with other people, but also to feel better about yourself. Just being good to yourself. Take breaks. I see so many people driving themselves to work all the time. And it's going to end up not necessarily benefiting you if you don't take some kind of breaks and have some fun. One of the best therapies is, and that's just a famous statement called laughter is the best medicine. And it's true. Laughing out loud with friends, perhaps playing games or sports, or also just watching some things. I enjoy stand-up comedy and sitcoms and funny movies when I need a mood uplift, and it really works. Other sorts of things. You can start journaling. And what is journaling? Journaling is just what it sounds like. It's really just sort of writing down aspects of your day or things that you think about, or maybe even logging your mood, your feeling, your thoughts. Some people do this at certain points during the day. Other people like to journal before bedtime. All these kinds of things, either one of those kinds of things can be helpful. Some people like to journal once a week, just to kind of see, well, where did I start this week and where have I ended up? Other two practices that can be very helpful, meditation and mindfulness. And meditation, you're probably more familiar with because meditation's been with us for a very long time. And there's lots of different apps that actually support meditation. There are YouTube tutorials, just actually a way to calm some of that noise in your mind, especially if you suffer from anxiety. And this is also true of mindfulness. Mindfulness has gotten more recent attention in the last decade or so, I would say. And mindfulness is related to meditation, but it's more of a stop in the moment and calm myself by breathing, by focusing on where I am right now through my senses. And again, you can investigate all these things through apps, tutorials, that sort of thing. There are some workshops even at our university that help train you in some of these things. What can I do to help myself as well? One of the best things is to start actually consciously replacing negative self-talk with positive self-talk. So some of those thoughts that you have that come up that say, I can't do this, or I'm not good at this, or no one's going to appreciate what I have to say, start pushing those thoughts aside and insert a positive thought instead. Practice self-validation and self-appreciation. Those things will help you to feel more confident and better about yourself. I think about this as treating yourself with kindness, the way that you would want someone else to treat you, and treat others with kindness. And maybe think about that they might be struggling with things in their life too. Reach out to them if you feel capable of that. Some of you are teaching, some of you will be teaching, all of you will be doing some kind of mentoring in some kind of way. And even if none of this applies to you, it might be good for you to recognize some of these things in people that you'll be working with in the future so that you can direct them to resources that they might need as well. So thank you for listening, and please let me know if you have any questions that you don't want to ask in this forum. And if any of these things triggered things for you, please contact a healthcare professional. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Presentation. I don't know if I raced through that or not, but
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Carolan, for the very nice presentation. Many people say thank you very much in the chat for your presentation.
Was happy to be here. Definitely a different experience over Zoom.
Yeah.
I was used to being in the classroom talking to people or talking one-on-one with clients. So this is a very, very different experience. So thank you all for listening.
It was really nice. I think it was very helpful for all the people that joined today.
Good, thank you.
All right. So I think we can,